Hello and welcome to this Safe Work New South Wales webinar. The title of this session today is Electrical Safety in the Workplace. This is one in a series of webinars specifically designed to help construction site supervisors to understand the importance of their roles and the major impact they have in maintaining safe and productive work sites. This topic is a particularly important one, as electrocution is the second leading cause of fatalities in construction in New South Wales. My name is Gary Colthorpe and I'm a Senior Inspector with Safe Work, and I'll be co-presenting this session with State Inspector Daniel Dayoud. Thanks for joining us today, Daniel.
Thanks, Gary. It's great to be here.
It certainly is, and Daniel and I will alternate between us as we take you through this presentation today. As Safe Work inspectors, we certainly see the significance and the importance of your roles and the influence you can have on site safety every time we step onto a building and construction site, especially including electrical safety. Wouldn't you agree, Daniel?
That's right, Gary. We certainly do. We can often tell from the moment we walk onto site just how serious the site supervisor is about maintaining WHS standards.
It's very true, and we're really hoping that by the end of this webinar, you'll have a good understanding of your responsibilities in relation to establishing and maintaining electrical safety in the workplace. So let's make a start by looking at the topics we're going to cover in this webinar. Firstly, we'll look at what's involved in managing electrical risks in the workplace. Then we'll consider the specific electrical hazards and risks you could expect to encounter on a construction or building site and the control measures required to manage these risks. Next, we'll look at specifically what the health and safety legislation says about this topic and what you're required to do by law. And then discuss the requirements for working de-energised and the general prohibition on energised electrical work and those specific issues related to that, as well as considerations for working near overhead and underground power lines. So let's now consider, when managing risks in the workplace, including electrical risk, taking a systematic approach is important and following a risk management process. The first step in the process involves identifying all hazards associated with electrical work and finding the things and situations that could potentially cause harm. Clause 34 of the Work Health Safety Regulations defines a hazard as anything that has the potential to cause harm to a person and confirms that a duty holder in managing risk to health and safety must identify reasonably foreseeable hazards that could give rise to health and safety risks. So keep in mind, hazards associated with electrical work will generally arise from the fact that work is being carried out on or near electrical installations or equipment, including overhead power lines or underground services. Because the electrical protection provided is inadequate, as a result of the type of electrical equipment used or how it is being used, the atmospheres that can present a risk for fire or explosion, or because equipment is moved from site to site and is more likely to be damaged. To assist you in identifying all the potential electrical hazards in your workplace, you should talk to your workers and observe where and how electrical work is being carried out. Do regular inspections and testing of electrical equipment and installations. Observe how electrical equipment is being used and consult with manufacturers, suppliers, industry associations or health and safety specialists, and review the details from any incident reports. The next step in the process is to assess the risks associated with each hazard identified. Electrical hazards present a risk of electrocution, fire or explosion, and can result in serious burns or even death. Clause 35 of the Work Health Safety Regulations refers to managing risk to health and safety and says that a duty holder in managing risk to health and safety must eliminate risks so far as reasonably practicable. And if it's not reasonably practicable to eliminate the risks, then to minimise those risks so far as is reasonably practicable. Now, Section 18 of the Work Health Safety Act defines an explanation of what reasonably practicable means, which includes that which is reasonably able to be done in relation to ensuring health and safety, taking into account all relevant matters. Some key considerations when assessing electrical risks in the workplace include an understanding the work practices and the requirements for isolation procedures, identifying the sources of electrical risk on the site, reviewing the competency, skills and experience of the workers undertaking the work, and considering the type of equipment to be used. The availability of suitable test instruments and appropriately rated personal protection equipment, as well as reviewing the site conditions and work environment, and ensuring the ability to rescue people safely if required. It's also important to consider individual workers' needs, such as the level of training they have or their physical capability to carry out individual work tasks. Okay, so now Daniel will take us through the next steps in the process. Thanks, Daniel.
The final steps in the risk management process involve determining how to eliminate or control the risks and implement the most effective control measures. If it's not reasonably practicable to eliminate the risk entirely, it is important to implement the most effective control measures in the circumstances you face. Clause 36 of the WHS regulation requires duty holders to work through the hierarchy of control measures when determining how best to manage those risks. The hierarchy ranks control measures from the highest level of protection and reliability to the lowest and includes eliminating the risk entirely, which for electrical safety would include working de-energized, substituting or replacing the hazard with something lesser of a risk, like using battery-operated tools in place of electrical tools, or isolating the risk by separating the hazard from workers by de-energizing a work area, for example. Implementing engineering controls to reduce the risks, such as using RCDs to prevent electric shock, and administrative controls, such as following safe work practices. And then ensuring that any remaining risks are minimized by suitable personal protection equipment, PPE, which will protect against the maximum expected energy available on site. Keep in mind that administrative control measures and PPE rely on human behavior and supervision, and so are the least effective risk controls. Reliance on these lower order control measures should only occur where other measures are not reasonably practicable. And then ensuring that these measures are regularly reviewed and maintained, and to ensure they are effective over time and are working as planned. It is important to understand also that Clause 37 of the WHS regulations refers to the maintenance of control measures and states, a duty holder who implements a control measure to eliminate or minimize risk to health and safety must ensure that the control measure is maintained so that it remains effective by ensuring the control measure is and remains fit for purpose, suitable for the nature and duration of the work, and is installed and set up and used correctly. Clause 38 refers to the review of control measures and states that a duty holder must review and, as necessary, revise control measures implemented so as to maintain a work environment that is without risks to health and safety. Remember, it is important that consultation takes place with workers who carry out the work for the business and are likely to be affected by the health and safety matters. This duty to consult is based on the recognition that worker input and participation improve decision-making about health and safety matters and assists in reducing work-related injuries and disease. For further guidance on following risk management process and hierarchy of control measures, you could refer to our Code of Practice, Managing Electrical Risks in the Workplace, which is available on our website. Let's now consider the practical measures you should take to specifically manage electrical hazards and risks on construction sites. It is important to be aware of the requirements of the WHS Act 2011, the associated WHS Regulations 2017, which details the specific laws for electrical work. Also, we have guidance material which include checklists for electrical safety on construction and demolition sites and other codes of practice and guidance material online. We have also developed numerous videos, fact sheets, and webcasts similar to the one we're participating in today. You would need to be aware of the content of an Australian New Zealand standard AS/NZS 3012, which contains specific detailed considerations for electrical installations on construction and demolition sites. All electrical installation work in Australia needs to be carried out in accordance to AS 3000, or what is known as the wiring rules. But on construction and demolition sites, you would need to apply AS 3000 in addition to additional controls mentioned in AS/NZS 3012. And Australian standard AS/NZS 3760, which provides detailed information for the in-service safety inspection and testing of electrical equipment and RCDs. In other words, it's the Australian standard that people do testing and tagging to. Now Gary will talk us through the next couple of slides relating to electrical hazards and control measures. Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Daniel. It's important that you're aware of all the requirements of the legislation, the codes of practice, and the Australian New Zealand standards. However, in this webinar, we're going to mention some of the key considerations to be aware of in these documents, such as the need to ensure that all portable electrical equipment is protected by a residual current device, or RCD. The electrical circuits are protected by appropriately rated circuit breakers. Electrical leads are installed and arranged so they won't be damaged. Electrical leads or tools are not used in wet conditions unless they're specifically designed for those conditions. And making sure that RCDs, electrical leads, and portable electrical equipment are regularly inspected, tested and tagged, and that a record of the testing is available on site. Also, if hiring electrical equipment, verify the equipment has been inspected at the start of each hire and then also tested at the correct intervals when in service. If RCDs or circuit breakers trip, ensuring that measures are taken for a competent person to determine the reason for the tripping before the circuit is re-energised. Ensuring that any unsafe electrical equipment is disconnected and not reconnected or reused until it's been repaired or tested by a competent person and found to be safe or is removed from site entirely. Ensuring that there is a safe system of work in place to manage potentially unsafe electrical equipment at the workplace. And making sure that personal protection equipment for electrical work is selected, provided to and worn by the workers. It's important also to remember that you must provide workers with information, training and instruction on the proper use of the PPE. Ensuring that no electrical work is carried out while the equipment is energised. There's a small number of exceptions to this rule, which we'll look at later in this webinar. Making sure that when electrical equipment or circuits are being worked on, that they remain de-energised through effective isolation methods, including locks, warning signs and danger tags. And if necessary, to leave unfinished work, ensuring that the workplace is left in a safe state, including terminating and securing any exposed conductors, tagging and taping off the electrical equipment and the work area, taking precautions to ensure the electrical equipment cannot be inadvertently energised, ensuring switchboards and electrical equipment are correctly labelled, and affected persons are informed of the potential hazards, and that there's adequate information handed over to the workers to allow them to work safely. Ensuring that construction work is enclosed in medium or heavy-duty rigid or corrugated PVC conduit or equivalent protection, which is marked with iridescent yellow tape with the words construction wiring to distinguish it from permanent wiring. And verifying that any wiring required to cross roadways or access ways is identified by insulated and tagged catenary wires to minimise the risk of vehicular contact. You need to ensure that switchboards used on construction sites are of a construction type with the specific requirements of AS/NZ 3012, incorporating double pole RCDs, having an insulated tie bar for anchoring flexible cords, doors that are removable by a tool, cutouts in the bottom for safe entry of leads, appropriate labels and warning signs, and that they're securely fixed to a freestanding structure. There are also specific requirements for lighting on site, including distributing lighting between circuits where there's more than one, making sure lighting levels are adequate for safe access and egress, and the light fittings have lamps that are protected against mechanical damage. And lift shaft equipment needs to be supplied from a separate circuit and protected by an RCD, with circuit breakers actually locked in the on position and tagged to prevent inadvertent isolation, and with supply cable that's of sufficient length to cover the full length of the lift shaft and installed in a way to minimise mechanical damage. There are also specific requirements for transportable structures on site, including ensuring supply from a dedicated submain or final subcircuit, with wiring installed as construction wiring. That they're supplied from a flexible cord no longer than 15 metres with a weatherproof plug and RCD protection, and with double pole outlets that are used only for equipment and lighting within or immediately adjacent to the structure. You need to ensure that you familiarise yourself with these and the other requirements of the work health safety legislation, codes of practice and Australian New Zealand standards to determine the requirements for managing electrical hazards and risks in the workplace. So now Daniel and I will talk you through the next couple of slides relating to what the legislation says about your responsibilities for identifying reasonably foreseeable hazards on a construction site. Thanks, Daniel.
Thanks, Gary. Before we go through these next few slides, we have a bit of a disclaimer. This is where we will talk about some of the key clauses in the legislation. We're just going to mention the highlights and paraphrase rather than quote the legislation word for word. This is not legal advice. We're just trying to help you understand a number of key responsibilities that you need to be aware of in your role as a supervisor. To review all your legal responsibilities and the full detail of these requirements, you need to look up the WHS Act 2011 and the WHS Regulations 2017, which are both available online. Now let's take a look at the legislation which confirms the items we have just covered and more. Keeping electrical safety in construction in mind, let's consider what Section 19 of the WHS Act says. A person conducting a business or undertaking, who we can think of as an employer or a business owner, has the primary duty of care to ensure the health and safety of workers engaged by them, and this includes providing and maintaining a work environment without risks to health and safety, safe plants and structures, safe systems of work, as well as ensuring the safe use and handling of and storage of plants, structures and substances, adequate facilities for the welfare of workers, and the information, training and instruction or supervision necessary to protect all persons from risks to their health and safety arising from the work carried out as part of the business or undertaking. And that the health of workers and the conditions at the workplace are monitored for the purpose of preventing worker illness or injury. Now we go to Section 16 of the WHS Act, which makes it clear that more than one person can have the same duty, and that each duty holder must comply with that duty even if another person has the same duty, and that if more than one person has the same duty, each person retains responsibility for it and must discharge it to the extent they have the capacity to influence and control it. So what does this mean for you as a construction site supervisor? It means that if you have a capacity to influence and control health and safety on site, then you have the legal duty to do so, irrespective of whether someone else has the same duty. There can be multiple duty holders on a construction site, such as the principal contractor, the project manager, site supervisor, site foreman, and the subcontractors and supervisors. And although roles and job descriptions for supervisors may differ from site to site in relation to the tasks they perform, every supervisor has responsibilities when it comes to work health and safety because of their ability to influence and control it on the worksite. No one in a supervisory role on a worksite should ever say that it's someone else's responsibility to manage health and safety if they have the capacity to influence and control the situation.
Clause 147 of the Work Health Safety Regulations refers to risk management and says that a PCBU must manage risk to health and safety associated with electrical risks at the workplace, and includes the example of electrical risks associated with the design, construction, installation, protection, maintenance and testing of electrical equipment and electrical installations at a workplace. Section 47 and 48 of the Work Health Safety Act refer to the duty to consult workers and the nature of consultation, and says that a PCBU must consult with workers who carry out work for the business or undertaking who are or are likely to be directly affected by the health and safety matter. And this duty to consult is based on the recognition that worker input and participation improves decision-making about health and safety matters and assists in reducing work-related injury and disease. Clause 149 of the regulations refers to unsafe electrical equipment and says that a PCBU must ensure that any unsafe electrical equipment at the workplace is disconnected or isolated from the supply, and once disconnected or isolated, is not reconnected until it is repaired or tested and found to be safe, or is replaced or permanently removed from the site. And Clause 150 of the regulations relates to the inspection and testing of electrical equipment and says that a PCBU must ensure that electrical equipment is regularly inspected and tested by a competent person if the equipment is supplied with electricity to an electrical socket outlet and used in an environment which exposes it to operating conditions that are likely to result in damage or a reduction in the expected lifespan, including conditions that involve exposure to moisture, heat, vibration, mechanical damage, corrosive chemicals or dust.
Clause 154 of the regulations, electrical work on energised electrical equipment is prohibited. A PCBU must ensure that electrical work is not carried out on electrical equipment while the equipment is energised. Clause 155 of the regulations, duty to determine whether the equipment is energised. A PCBU must ensure that before electrical work is carried out on electrical equipment, the equipment is tested by a competent person to determine whether or not it is energised. Clause 156 of the regulations, de-energised electrical equipment must not be inadvertently re-energised. A PCBU must ensure that electrical equipment that has been de-energised to allow electrical work to be carried out safely is not inadvertently re-energised while the work is being carried out. Clause 157 of the regulations, electrical work on energised electrical equipment when permitted, says that a PCBU must ensure that electrical work on energised electrical equipment is not carried out unless it is necessary in the interest of health and safety, that the electrical work is carried out on the equipment while the equipment is energised. The regulations actually give an example in this space, and it says that it may be necessary that life-saving equipment remain energised while electrical work is carried out on the equipment. It is necessary that electrical equipment to be worked on is energised in order for the work to be carried out properly, or it's necessary for the purposes of testing required under Clause 155, or there is no reasonable alternative means of carrying out the work. Clauses 158 to 162 of the WHS regulations detail specific requirements that a PCBU must ensure are followed before electrical work on energised electrical equipment commences. Any proposal to undertake these works would require a PCBU to have a detailed understanding of their obligations under the WHS legislation. The Code of Practice Managing Electrical Risks in the Workplace provides additional cautions on this situation of undertaking when permitted and says that requiring electrical work to be carried out while the equipment is energised when it could be avoided places an onerous responsibility on the business or undertaking carrying out the work to minimise the risks. And if an incident occurs as a result of carrying out energised electrical work, the business or undertaking carrying out the work is at the risk of being found to have not provided a safe workplace. So Gary now will take us through a summary of the key elements for working de-energised. Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Daniel. So when summarising the key elements for working de-energised, it's important to consider that all electrical work must only be carried out by appropriately licensed electrical workers. You must then ensure that before electrical work is carried out on electrical equipment, the equipment is tested by a competent person to determine whether or not it is energised. And even if the electrical supply is believed to have been isolated, it must be assumed that all conductors and electrical components are energised until proven otherwise. You must also ensure that electrical equipment that has been de-energised to allow the work to be carried out on it cannot inadvertently be re-energised. And if there's any exposed conductors in the immediate work area, they should be separated by design or segregated and protected with insulated materials to prevent inadvertent or direct contact. Let's now look at the considerations that you need to be made for working near overhead and underground electrical services. Clause 166 of the Work Health Safety Regulations relates to overhead and underground electrical lines and the duty of the PCBU, and says that a PCBU must ensure that no person, plant or thing at the workplace comes within an unsafe distance of overhead or underground electrical lines. If it's not reasonably practicable to ensure the safe distance from an overhead or underground line, the PCBU must ensure that a risk assessment is conducted in relation to the proposed work, and the control measures are implemented and consistent with the risk assessment. And the electrical supply authority requirements, where they're responsible for the overhead line, are taken into account and adhered to. It's important, therefore, to not work too close to overhead or underground power lines. And if it's not practical, you need to do a risk assessment and follow the advice of the supply authority. Before starting work, check the Look Up and Live app and Before You Dig Australia to know where the electrical lines are near to your site. The Work Near Overhead Power Lines Code of Practice provides more information on working safely around power lines, including guidance on safe working distances. Here's where I'd like to mention some of our additional resources, which is our podcast series, also known as Safety Casts. These podcasts are available for a number of different work health safety topics in construction, including scaffolding, electrical safety, working at heights, to name a few. They involve safe work inspectors discussing these topics and also contain information about additional resources available to the industry. As well as watching our other webinars in this Supervisor series, we encourage you to tap into this additional Safety Cast resource, as they're great for toolbox talks with short, sharp messaging, and they're available online, and also on many of the media platforms and apps, including Spotify and Apple Play. Simply search for Safe Work Safety Casts in your search engine to access the latest of these podcasts. There's also a large amount of guidance material available through the Safe Work New South Wales website. This material will assist you to understand how to maintain high standards of health and safety on your work sites and reduce workplace injuries. We really encourage you to access and read through this information. Simply visit the Safe Work New South Wales website and type your topic search into the search bar. And our Speak Up app also allows you to advise us of any unsafe work activity you may encounter, and you can remain anonymous. You can download this app through the Safe Work New South Wales website. So in wrapping up our webinar, we'd like to remind you that you can always contact us on 13 10 50 to seek advice, report a health and safety concern, or to speak to an inspector about any health and safety matter. Well, Daniel, that's a wrap for this webinar. So thank you for joining us today, and thank you to everyone who attended the webinar as well. We hope you found the information valuable.
Thanks, Gary, and thank you for joining us today, everyone. And we hope to see you again.
Finally, although all care has been taken to ensure that the information in this webinar is correct at the time of publication, the laws do change over time, and you need to ensure that you are accessing the most current legislation to ensure that the information is up to date. The information contained in this presentation is provided as a guide and does not necessarily represent the views of Safe Work New South Wales. This webinar is for educational and development purposes only. Thank you for watching this Safe Work New South Wales webinar.